Whew. Hey folks, I'm Serious JG, and welcome to my Created Officers Lethal Lottery Winners Revealed Gathering of Heroes, whatever you want to call it, video for Nobunaga's Ambition Sphere of Influence. As announced in my first video of the series, I'm opening this LP up for people to submit characters. Rather, I had, and now it's done. Um, you will see there are 67 created officers. That is because the game starts off with 16 that you can activate. And I have those guys non-active, although I think I'll activate them when it's time to actually start the LP. But the 51 active officers are 51 created officers that I put in the game. That's right, folks. 51 because I fucked up and didn't remember JG Mystery when putting this together. And he is JG Mystery, by the way. I was inspired to change it back to JG Mystery by Vulture Bobo, who submitted Vulture Bobo rather than Bobo the Vulture. But yeah, I think my previous record. Let's see how many. I think I've still got a window open. How many characters? Maybe I closed it. Yeah, I think I actually closed it. But I had like 40 something characters, created characters in my RTK10 LP. But like over a dozen of those were because I wanted to, female characters mostly in the Dynasty Warriors series who didn't appear as officers in Romance of Three Kingdoms. And I know it's not historically accurate, but I think it's fun to let the ladies participate. And I was pleased to see a couple, not a lot, but a couple of female created officers were submitted, or rather submitted and actually accepted. Won the Lethal Lottery, that is to say. I don't know if that's female viewers on the channel, which, always nice to know that you got some. It's predominantly male hobbies. Always nice to think you got some ladies of the female persuasion watching. Or if it's guys who have, like, female avatars from whatever. But, yeah. So in RTK 10, I only had, like, I think about 35 characters that I made, and 10 of them were kind of like free, they were people who, there was a couple of people who actually helped gather information to help me do the LP. Somebody sent me a save file, like actually emailed me a save file that I was able to use my emulator to unlock stuff without having to play through the game several times on an emulator. Somebody else gathered the stat information on my RTK 11 characters because I wanted to use that to round off and figure out the the limitations on points that people could spend. And then a couple of others were people who had been a big part of my RTK 11 LP, other LPers, Bobo and Grimmeth were both in it, of course. Yeah, that sort of a thing. And I ended up really having like 25 spots that were given, you could randomly win 25 spots plus 10 that were locked in advance, and a couple from the game, and I ended up with 40 something. This time I got 51. JG Mysteries won. There was only 5 gaming, or 5 slots that I gave to people who were like predetermined that they were getting in if they submitted a character. And I'll go ahead and explain. I wasn't going to explain in detail, but I'll go ahead and explain that the 5 people who pretty much got characters automatically if they submitted were Zerfall, Lethal Feline, Grimmeth, Boa the Vulture, and Bean. And my rule was that even though there were like some long-time subscribers who comment on other series, people who are watching my longer, less viewed series, that I was really rooting for you guys to win in the Lethal Lottery, but I didn't automatically give anybody an in unless I'd actually been part of an LP with them. And Lethal's kind of right on the bubble because we'd never done an LP together, but we were both part of Surfall's charity stream simultaneously, and I thought that was, that was good enough. So Lethal was in. And then, like, by the same logic, like, I came up with that rule, and then I was like, oh, fuck, what about Old Dragon? Old Dragon is an LPer. He watches my stuff and comments. I watch his stuff and comment. But I wanted to set some pretty clear rules for myself and then make myself stick with them. So Old Dragon had to go in the pot with everyone else, and it was up to chance whether he got in. And there's a couple of guys, I'm just telling you, I feel bad. I tried really, I was really rooting for people to get in, and certain people to get in, and certain people I was really rooting for didn't make it. Pandey Putu Basurama didn't make it, even though I was rooting for him. There's another one that popped in. I think Shoot to Maim actually did get in. I'll know in a second. Who else was I really rooting for that didn't make it? I'll know when I see Laurentian, I think is how you pronounce his username. He didn't make it. I was rooting for him just because he pops up and comments on all my other stuff. The last entrant to be considered, High Priest Funeral. He was on the list of people that I was expecting to show up, hoping he would show up. He actually showed up after the deadline, but it was only by a couple of hours. So I was like, okay, I'll let him sneak in late, and he can be considered. So, High Priest Funeral, you were in the consideration, but you didn't get picked. Neither did Old Dragon. There's a couple of people I was really rooting for. And actually, funny little story, the day that I was actually doing this, which was the day after, like midnight on Friday, the 11th of September, was the deadline. And on Saturday, like kind of, late morning, heading on towards noon time is where I sat down and started putting this together. And I'll tell you, Old Dragon had debuted a new series, and it's a Final Fantasy II, like Japanese Final Fantasy II, the one that was released on Famicom but never came to the US until much later. So he was playing a translation of Final Fantasy II, and when he went to name his party members, I was like, oh man, please don't name them after LPers you like, because if I end up having a character in your LP, and I'd already drawn the lots and figured out who was in and who was out and who was out, but he actually named his characters after, like, characters that he uses in other things, and possibly based on knowledge of what would happen in the game. And he didn't just go with, like, YouTubers. So it's like, whew, man, what an ass I would have been if I had 50 created characters and I couldn't find room to give him one. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly read off the YouTube usernames of the people who won the Lethal Lottery. Again, Mysterious JG is in there, making it 51 instead of 50 because I forgot. Then there's 5 people: Zerfall, Lethal, Grimmeth, Bobo, and Bean. And that means there's 45 people who won the Lethal Lottery. I had a total of 85 entrants that I considered basically acceptable. There was a couple of people who submitted entries where they left too many things that they didn't fill out. Quite a few people who were in there and even got selected, they left like 1 or 2 things, like, hey, JG, you're like, yeah, pick this. I don't really care, whichever you want on this one, or whatever's convenient. There's quite a few people, not quite a few, a couple people forgot to pick a trait after they'd picked their growth type, or not trait, it was an ability. It'll make sense when we get in there. But yeah, if you missed 1 or 2 little things, a couple people didn't specify a location, so I just, went to instead of going to the map, I went to the list mode and just like closed my eyes and, held the directional stick for a certain amount of time and let go and plopped them in that city, and that was fine. But there were other people submitted where like half or even more than half they'd left blank. It was like, I want to be male, this is my name, give me a portrait of somebody who looks badass, and you can figure out the rest, dude. I don't have time to do this later. I hope I get in. I'm like, no, you're not getting in. You're not getting considered, because there were people who went through very carefully putting together their created character and didn't get in. So if you didn't do a full submission, you weren't even in the draw. And if you did like 3/4 and left a couple of things, if you forgot something, or you wrote it out but said, nah, I don't have a strong preference, you just pick, then I was okay with that. Like, you went into the draw and you had a chance to get picked like anyone else. So I wasn't going to be super picky. Although I could have been, because I had, like I said, 85 people submit. So I could have been really picky with not even considering you if you left anything out. And I still would have had more entrants than I actually wanted to do. And here's the thing. Somebody, in a joking kind of way, like with a smiley face after, said, oh man, that was like 30 minutes worth of work, LOL, putting together a character. Well, guess what, folks? It took me hours to create all these characters. I wanted to do more characters than I'd done in previous LPs. But jumping from 35 to 45, I don't know, that was a good idea. If I do any more of these, I might not have quite so much, although now that the character's created, it doesn't matter. But I'll be honest with you, I got to a point, I had a website, random.org, that was generating random numbers for me. I was just setting random numbers between 1 and 85. I had everybody's usernames written out in an Excel spreadsheet so that, you know, the first person to submit, Deshaun Miller, was in row 1. The last person to submit, High Priest Funeral, was in row 85. And I set the parameters on the random number generator to go from 1 to 85, and I just kept picking numbers. And I got to a point where it was like every time, like I thought I would stop at 35, but I was really hoping that Old Dragon would get in. So I was like, well, I'll go to 40. And then, no, he still didn't get in. I'll go to, and I had to stop at some point. But with 85 entrants and 45 people who got in, you had just a slightly better than even odds of getting in. So it was roughly even odds. Anyway, I'm now going to read the list of YouTube users who got in. And if you didn't get in and you want to sulk, you know, it's cool. I hope you'll watch the LP, but I won't take it real personal if you don't watch the rest of this video, where I'm going to go through and introduce all the created characters. Anyway, the people who got in were Deshaun Miller, Pedro Santos, Coors 4, Disaster Dillons, Jason Yao, aka Jason Erogi, The Riggers, Lucas 2009, The Axe Dwarf, Die Finsternis, Piano LP94, Sasspot Keep, and I was really glad he made it because he made Pretty Princess Gaiden. But it was luck of the draw. If he hadn't made it, I wasn't going to cheat to get him in. And somebody whose username is one of those usernames I can't make any sense out of, J4WS0M3, you made it in, although there's a little quirk with your character that you might not like. We'll get there in a minute. David Corporeal, RCH, A. Heckman118, 821 Snafdub, Phantom Soup, congrats Phantom Soup, Ryan Applegong, good for you, Yankster1234, Adam523, Fishman 58585, Mad Mikey West, Thomas Neely, who calls himself Master Reaper, Zoro640, I Am the Darkness 100, Mr. Zalakong, Zillaroth, Key Park 52. You're right next to another user whose name is similar, but I'm not going to read it because I don't want them to accidentally think they got in. Alan Cope, M. Bazia, Shoot to Mame 88, I was hoping you'd make it. Van Helsing Fan 1, I was hoping you'd make it. Ray Legend 33, and by the way, if I mention your name and you're a regular viewer and I don't say good for you or glad you made it, it's probably because I don't remember your username. I always just recognize your icon. So don't get upset about that. But Ray Legend 33, Shadow Wolf Rising, so that's good. Colo Wing, which is, you know, Michael Cole in an alternate reality where he's a pilot. Chevalier SA, and I'm glad he made it because he was threatening to call me a misogynist jock who thinks that women are prizes to be won. Which now that threat's off the table because he got in. He was gonna come at me with that, and it was gonna be very upsetting. And I was gonna spend way too long responding to him. Fallout New Vegas reference, folks. Prof Bro Po, good for you. I'm glad you got in. Prof Bro Pro has a My Little Pony avatar, but claims he hates the brony culture because he's not a brony. So make of that what you will. Kai Ireland, Mookie Mog is in. So. And, you know, when I noticed Mookie Mog getting in, I started thinking, should I have gone back and disqualified people who'd already been in RTK LPs and give other people a better chance of getting in? And the answer was no, because I didn't say anything like that in advance, so it would have been fair for me to switch roles. But no, Mookie Mog's cool, and I'm glad he got in. It's just, it did make me kind of ponder that for a minute. Like, if I do this again, maybe I should not use the people who've already gotten in. Lord of Lions, luck of the draw, what can I say? Kadia of LSNA, Armageddon Evil, Armageddon Married in the Morning, Duper Da, Magra56723, and KMZ42. All you guys got in. Everybody else, thank you so much. A small number of you, like I said, submitted applications for like one guy actually had a kind of involved, like, a little bit of character sort of backstory, or like had thought out their character's personality, and in their comment there's I'm making this up, but they say things like, you know um, Super Samurai 227, he doesn't speak often, but when he does, his words carry great weight. His friends know him as someone who doesn't laugh often, but when he does, he laughs loud and hard. But he's someone you can depend on, a noble spirit. But then wouldn't, like, actually put in, like, this is what I want for pull, this is what I want for intelligence. I'm like, no, dude, I'm not looking for a novel. I'm looking for a simple character submission. Anyway, so that's silly. And now it's time. If you're still here because you're not angry that you didn't make it, I'm going to go through these characters and just kind of showcase who these characters are, because there's 51 of them. It's going to take a while, and there's a chance some of them may never really appear in the LP. It's the nature of the beast. So if you're not interested in seeing that, the next video is going to be the video where the LP itself actually starts. So thank you for watching. Please tune in next time. For everyone else, I'm going to go through the characters, and if I got something wrong, you need to respond to this video or like toot sweet. Don't private message me. I don't check them often enough. Reply to this video. I'll be keeping an eye on the comments of this video, and let me know if something's wrong, because I'm probably going to sit down and record a few videos tomorrow. I'm not going to like after I record this video, I'm shutting down for the night, but I'll probably record a few videos tomorrow. If I start recording and you want to change something about your character and it's too late, it's too late. I can go in and change it so that the next game I start, they'll be different, but they'll be locked in that way in the current LP. And the only way for me to edit within a save would disrupt the historical scenario stuff popping up. It's not going to happen. So if you got the wrong face, there's a very, very good chance you screwed up, because I was pretty careful. But if you got the wrong face because you said row 6 and you meant to say, or so you said row 2, column 3, and you meant row 3, column 2, or if you didn't understand what I meant by pages, because I had somebody who had page last and then page 9 on the male faces, and it's like, no, that's the same thing. Page 9 is only really one row because of the way that it fell out. So, like, I could tell from the fact that their faces they chose looked nothing like each other, that they had miscounted or misunderstood, and that they weren't giving me the face that they actually wanted. So come back and correct it, or anything else, as soon as possible, because there's a real good chance you're just going to have to live with it otherwise. So going through real quick, JG Mystery we already know about. I did change his name to JG Mystery. He's no longer Mysterious JG. And his stats changed slightly. A lot of people pointed out I was incorrect in my first video. You can start at 100 and still grow. Your stats can go up to 120. 100 is the highest that they can start at, but they can grow to 120 with experience. I didn't see that many people maxing out their stats, probably because they took my incorrect information. I apologize. But it's not that big a deal. But yeah, I went ahead and like took away some of his valor and leader and put it into intelligence and pull, because again, he's not really going to be a warrior character per se. And I went ahead, now that Vulture Bobo submitted a character, I made Vulture Bobo Mysterious JG's relative. Vulture Bobo, JG Mystery, and Vulture Bean. They are the only characters in this who have relatives. Thought about making Lethal and Grimmeth relatives, but, neither of them specified that, and I didn't say anything about doing that during the video, so I decided to just leave that be. Next up is Deshaun Miller. He's, there he is. He's kind of a warrior type here. Pull is his dump stat. All the stats are good. And I had a few people who actually gave me lower abilities than they were allowed. Like their abilities added up to less than 320. And I had at least 2 people who were picked, because I didn't read through the comments for the people who weren't picked. Sorry, not all the way through anyway. Who mentioned that, yeah, this is actually too many points. These guys are all too strong. And that's true. Your created characters are all well above the game average for officers. I thought that would be fun. Um, Second guessing it, maybe we are all a little broken, especially because if you spread your points evenly, everybody's at 80 on everything, which basically means you're well above average in every skill ability type. So, but it is what it is. So this guy, he's got 100 valor, 80 leader, 80 intelligence. He's pretty much going to be a military type of dude, and he's fierce horseman growth type. And I don't remember where he actually ended up. He's a Ronin and Tetsuji. So I don't know if he asked for that or if I just pulled it out at random, because there was a couple of people where that happened. They asked for a random location. There's a couple of people who asked for a specific location. If you didn't say specifically Ronin or an officer for the force, I made you Ronin. Unless you told me the name of the force, in which case I made you an officer for that force. And in a couple of cases, somebody actually said that they wanted to live in a city controlled by such and such force, but as a Ronin. Well, from what I've seen, hiring officers is a one-time expense in this game, and so like having like 50 officers and having a bunch of them sitting around not doing anything doesn't hurt you. There's an initial outlay to get an officer, and then that's it. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Also in this game, officers, like hiring a Ronin, is a 100% success. It's not something where you have to go negotiate with them and sometimes they'll reject you, blah blah blah. They will always come to work for you. The game's reckoning is the Ronin is in the city because they're seeking employment. So if you gave me a specific force, like somebody wanted to be, I want to be in Takeda territory, but as a Ronin, there's a very, very good chance you'll be working for the Takeda. It's not that likely you're going to be drifting around and I'll find you. But, well, I mean, I might find you when I eventually go to war with the Takeda. Anyway, moving on. Next we had Tanaka Tsukishima, who's kind of an all-around dude, a little bit more favoring the intelligence and pull. But he ended up in some city. Corey Hall. He's a Ronin in some city or other. I don't really... Some of these... Like, I made 50, so I don't remember anything. I don't remember specifically a lot about each character that I made. But if things come to me, I will talk about them. He's kind of made pull his dump stat, so he's more of a military type of dude as well. You've got Dylan Disaster. Here comes the X, here comes the Smasher with demolition, that Dylan Disaster. He's got a build very similar to Mysterious JG's, actually, where he's going for intelligence and politics. Didn't max either of them, probably because he listened to my stupid, wrong information, saying that if you did that, then you couldn't gain any benefit from increased experience. And he ended up in Iyama as a Ronin. So I don't really remember that place, but it is what it is. Jason Orogi. Don't know for sure this is the character picture you wanted. Jason is one of the guys where well, maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is one of the ones where I wasn't absolutely positive about whether I got the picture that they wanted. He's a master of the great blade. And he's a Ronin in some city or other. And he... Elite Ninja. Yeah, I remember the comment from Jason Orogi was, Elite Ninja, because why not? Why not indeed? Why not indeed? Kind of a boring ability layout, but, it'll work. And he's also the God of War. He's kind of he's above average at everything, not great at anything, but he is the God of War and an elite ninja, so that makes sense. Next up's Fat John. Look in there, that pudgy little face. He's got the Vanguard, which is actually a pretty impressive looking tactic if I remember it correctly. And he's a tactician who is going for a primarily military build. And he ended up as a retainer in Gasan Toda, so I don't remember what force that is. Kind of feel like looking it up. Fortunately, the only way to look it up is to... No, I don't want to change that. Sorry. Gasan Toda look it up real quick. So he's working for the Imago. And that's interesting because they're not one of the bigger clans. They've only got the one base. So I don't know enough about the Imago. Wait, it looks like they've got 4 bases. But anyway, I don't know enough about the Imago to know why this YouTuber who made the Fat John character wants to work for them. But he's going to work for them. That's pretty cool. And it's a small little force like that. Well, not that small, but it's one of the forces that's not like really powerful like the Hojo or the Takeda. Having an officer this powerful, especially with the military, not thrown into their ranks, could be a big change to the game. I'm going to try to follow the historical path in the game and see if I can get all the way through all the historical events in one timeline. But having added 50 kind of semi-broken characters scattered randomly across the map, I may have really fucked that up. Here is Tadayuki Uhara, who I'm going to be straight with you, whoever came up with this character. Because you have a like actual Japanesey name, there's a real good chance that I'm not going to recognize you as a created character if I ever run across you. I'll just think you're one of the officers that isn't famous enough for me to know anything about them. He's a bond breaker, so don't make a deal with this guy. Could go south. And he wants to work at Odani as a Ronin. And he's got kind of a warrior type of build, sort of, kind of. He's good at retreating, which seems odd. And this was the Axe Dwarf's character, Mitsuhide Axechi. Get it? If he comes to work for the Oda, Nobunaga's got to keep a close eye on this guy. He might murder Nobunaga before Mitsuhide Axechi even gets a chance. He's got the 3 arrows tactic. He gave himself a lifespan of 84 years, so most people just went with 110. That's what I did. It feels like cheating, but it maximizes your chance of being a big part of the story. But the Dwarf Axe decided to go with a somewhat more plausible lifespan. He's in Toyama as a Ronin. I don't remember what city Toyama is or where it's at. But he's a minister, and he's going for more of an intelligence political build. So he could be, if he ends up working for one of the smaller forces, he could make a big difference to them, because he'll really help them develop their cities faster. Skathi Njorth, I don't know how to pronounce that. Old Dragon, you might have to live vicariously through this character, because I think that's a Nordic name. Big ups to somebody for coming up with I love it when people come up with the female characters. This game, actually, I didn't have to add a bunch of female characters to get my favorite Samurai Warriors chicks in, because it actually has an option where you can have females appear as officers. Maidens are always part of the game because, when a daughter is born to a noble family, they will marry her off to another noble family to secure a diplomatic and political bond. And that's a big thing in real history of this, well, the whole world, really, but in Japan and this period of time, that was a big thing, and the game incorporates that. But it also allows you, and this is a more of a fantasy. Oh, what the hell? Let's bend the rules a little bit and have fun. Of having women like be officers who would go out and help build castles and lead armies. And that wasn't really a real thing. Not saying it's right or wrong, but Japanese women in the 16th century weren't really doing that kind of thing. But this one could be, if she wants to. She's conservative. It's actually unusual. Almost all of the female created characters that were submitted were progressive. And that kind of makes sense when you think about it, because it was like, it's beyond progressive for a woman to be like holding an important political office at this point. There's a couple of like famous legends, like I forget her name, but there's the chick with the red armor in Samurai Warriors 4 is based on a woman who like technically was the ruler of a clan for a short time. And of course Ginchio, they make a big deal of it. But by and large, the stories of women like doing adventurous stuff in that era are kind of fanciful. But this is a conservative woman. She hates the fact that as a woman she's allowed to have power, but she does wield some power. And she went with kind of an interesting build. She's a female ninja, and she's got leadership, which is like a good attack kind of deal. But her defense is actually her weakest stat, so like I wouldn't necessarily want to bring her out in battle. But if you do, she's gonna do a lot of damage. She might take some damage too. Hans Verst, he is a guy who exists. He's I keep doing that. He's a tactician. He's kind of got more of a political build. Actually, this is a really interesting one. This guy wanted to be really good at valor, intelligence, and pull, so he dumped leadership. You know, people have a right to build their character the way they want to, but the thing is that this, you know, he would not be able to do a lot of damage as the leading general, but his troops would have high survivability. So it's not like, it doesn't make sense to ignore the valor stat if you don't want to, you know, just in case you find yourself leading troops. But yeah, this is a guy who I would assume is not really looking for a lot of combat. Because leader and valor kind of need to be balanced if that's what you want to do. And I'm so glad that Pretty Princess Kaiden made it in. Kaiden here with an orange wedge. Kaiden asked for his location to be the KFC heat lamp, but since I couldn't figure out what would be the KFC heat lamp. Now, KFC's all over Japan now. It's even more popular in China. But I went ahead and just randomly picked a city for you. Despite the strong temptation to just add you directly to my force, I didn't do that unless someone specifically requested it. I didn't add you to my force. So he's in just some random place doing his thing. He's built for war. 82 leadership, 85 valor, 80 intelligence. Those are all things that are going to be very useful in war. Intelligence stats also useful in some domestic stuff, but the primary domestic stat is pull. And while this guy doesn't have a bad pull stat, it is the dump stat for Pretty Princess Kaiden. Sadly, Kaiden is not allowed to have like decryption as a skill. J4W Pirate, the middle-aged male pirate. You might notice something a little unusual about J4W Pirate's portrait. Buddy, I don't know if you misunderstood something about how the page count worked, or if you just lost count. I know it was a long section, probably pretty boring to sit through. This is the portrait you picked, and you picked two other portraits as alternates. I couldn't tell if you were trying to be, you know, have fun with it and give yourself a female portrait and then play a rough, gruff character with overbearing power and, you know, ogre and naval master kind of, you know. I thought maybe you were doing it intentionally to be funny, so I didn't want to switch, but of your three choices, two of them were female, only one of them was male, and so I couldn't really. So, you know, J4W Pirate guy, I forget your actual username, J4W something else. If you don't want this face, respond to this video quickly, because if, you know, by some chance you don't happen to see the video right away, you're going to be stuck with this face, and it'll be kind of funny, and I kind of hope you stick with it. It might be amusing, but yeah, this is probably not what you wanted. But yeah, J4W is an actual retainer in Nijo, and I think when people pick retainer, I'm actually interested enough. This would mean they actually went out of their way to choose a force that they wanted to work for. So I'm going to quick look up Nijo quickly as I can. Take just a second here, folks. Just a second. So there's Nijo. Oh, so you want to work for the Ashikage. Okay, Ashikaga. They're a fairly major force. They were, if I'm not mixing them up with someone else, they were aligned with the Azai, and were considered kind of the more powerful force in that partnership, but Nagamasa Azai's like own super badass leadership meant that he was the one who was carrying the burden, and they kind of sucked, as I recall. But that's kind of the way it gets portrayed in the Kawaii games, anyway. In real history, they're pretty important. But I might be mixing them up with somebody else. Either way, this lady pirate man is working for that force. Now we got Hana Shapiro, another lovely lady character. Who is the more traditional. Oh, you know what I haven't been looking at is people's required loyalty. So Hana Shapiro is the first one where that jumped out at me. That's a very high required loyalty number. So if Hana Shapiro is working for your force, she's gonna make you earn her loyalty. She's not gonna put up with a bunch of shit. That's the positive way to put it. The negative way to put it is that she's like treacherous and will jump the first chance she gets, and there's no loyalty. So you can look at it either way you want to. But she's a cheerful lady. She's a Ronin in Sakato, and she went for more of a political type of build. And now we have Erl King. So I don't really know if this is meant to be Der Erlkönig, but if it is Der Erlkönig, well, all I can say is, Du liebes Kind, komm, geh mit mir, gar schöne Spiele spiel ich mit dir, manch bunte Blumen sind an dem Strand, meine Mutter hat manch gulden Gewand. Yeah, that's Der Erlkönig. If Der Erlkönig, you might not know who Der Erlkönig is if you're, not like German. If you're not a big fan of Franz Schubert music. If Der Erlkönig ever asks you to come with him, don't go with him. Der Erlkönig, not a good guy. It translates into the Alder King. For what it's worth. But anyway, Der Erlkönig here, he's a handsome-looking devil, despite the fact that he's supposed to be some kind of, like, ditch. But he's cunning fox, he's, progressive, believes in supporting the clan. He's a Ronin in Edo, which I think eventually ends up being Tokugawa territory, but I don't really remember. And he's fairly even build, but he's gone for tactician despite being primarily an intelligence and pull character. So, but yeah, he's a pretty even-tiered kind of dude, and he would be a good addition to your force. And now we have Guo Away, which I still like that joke. It makes more sense in RTK than it does in Nobunaga's Ambition, since Guo is a Chinese name, but whatever. He's another one of these guys who you better treat him right or he's going to ditch your ass. And he gave himself, he's one of the guys I think that mentioned that the stats were broken. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he just left everything at 50. It's kind of a boring build, but at the same time it made it easy. I didn't have to go in and adjust anything, but he's lucky. He's lucky I didn't disqualify him is what he is. Boom. I'm just kidding. I would never disqualify Guo Away. I wouldn't tell him to go away. Then we have Zei Kanpachi, who I may or may not recognize as a created character when he shows up, because the name is just different enough from what I would expect the name to look like in this game that I might notice. He's an Odani. Isn't that my base? I think that's my base. There's a couple of different people who asked to, instead of giving a specific location, they just said somewhere in central Honshu, or somewhere near where the Oda are. And if they didn't give me a specific city, but they said central Honshu, oh, no. That's actually Azai Nagamasa's territory. Well, his father at this point, but yeah, so never mind, he's not with me. But a couple of people, he might have actually specifically asked for that then, but a couple of people asked for, just put me somewhere near where the game starts, or put me in central Honshu. And I literally just, would, put my cursor there, and then close my eyes and just play around with the left stick, and then stick them with the closest place. And I actually ended up getting a created officer that way, and there's another created officer that is going to start out working for Nobutomo, and I think the plot is going to require me to go to war with Nobutomo once Nobuhide is dead, and I'm playing as Nobunaga. I think I have to go to war with Nobutomo to unify the Oda, which means I'm going to have... I had a created officer who's kind of political who ended up with me just by chance, and another one who, the same thing. They were just like, just put me somewhere in the center, who's actually going to start out working for a rival. Although they're both Ronin, but they're going to get hired. And I think one of them actually ended up working for the Totomi here, which is going to be... the Imagawa, which could be a problem. But anyway, getting back to it, he actually selected a growth type from a character in history. He picked Masayuki Sanada, Mazuyuki's an interesting. It's kind of strange it took as long as it did for him to get into the Samurai Warriors games, but he's Yukimura's brother who ended up on the opposite side of him during the great, you know, war between the Western Coalition and the Eastern Coalition. And he actually married the daughter of Tadakatsu Honda, aka Ina. So yeah, interesting stuff. He's locked up in loyalty to the Tokugawa, even though his brother Yukimura is famous and loved as the guy who made the very last stand against the Tokugawa. Like, the Tokugawa defeated Yukimura and took his castle, and that was kind of like the end of the game. That was when they won for reals. And the Japanese, like a lot of cultures, love, kind of romance the idea of someone fighting for a lost cause. But the Japanese absolutely love that, and that's what Yukimura's all about. But Mazuyuki was his brother. And let's move on. So, Soup Phantom, I'm glad you made it in, buddy, because I can't remember if you got into the RTK one, but I know you were trying to start your own RTK LP, and you seem like you're pretty into it, so I'm glad you got in. He's set a lifespan other than 110. A couple of people did that. He ended up in Nagoya. I can't remember if he selected that or not. But yeah, he went with a political build. So officers like this can be really, really useful. And then Zur Uncle Bal Do Fall. The name that Zur Fall actually asked for was like first name Zur and then Uncle Baldo in quotes, last name Fall. And it wouldn't let me do it. And then I tried to I even like I can't even put in the quotes because it goes over the total character limits for names. And I couldn't do Zur Uncle Baldo as first name because that went over the character limit for the first name. So I tried to get clever and make the last name, but then there's that gap. But yeah, that's the closest I could get. And I thought about just dropping Uncle Baldo. I figured the reason that Falger in RTK 11 was called Uncle Baldo, because at that point I'd never seen what Zurfall looked like before. I didn't know that Zurfall was actually bald. He had just picked a bald avatar. So I wasn't really making fun of Zurfall himself, I was making fun of the avatar. I'm not even really making fun of him. Uncle Baldo is just a reference from Mystery Science Theater, as is most of what I say on a day-to-day basis. So, anyway, Zur Uncle Baldo Ball. That's his new name. His tactic is Ghost Coins, or as he put it in his description, Ghost Coins, which I thought was pretty hilarious. And he ended up in Tokuyama. Why did he end up? Well, okay, let's check this first. He wanted his growth type to be Tragic Beauty, which I thought was hilarious. But as it turns out, there are certain growth types that are specific to women. To me, this is not fair. They specifically, if you pick female daimyo, woman, homemaker, which really kind of rubbed me the wrong way, a couple of those, your experience you have to gain has to be as a female officer. If you can select that as your growth type, but it will mean you never get any traits. It's kind of weird, but it's actually set up that way. If your character's gender is male, certain female growth types won't work. But if your character is female, any growth type will work. They don't say you can't set your growth type to ogre or daimyo or whatever, because none of the growth types are specifically male. There's just a small number that are specifically female. So he luckily he gave me another one. He said, just in case that doesn't work, maybe I actually danced around explaining that during the initial video. I don't remember. But he gave me Diplomatic Monk as the backup. So he's a Diplomatic Monk. You didn't pick a trait. So in most cases, if you didn't pick a trait, I didn't give you an extra trait because you don't need an extra trait. It's just like one extra trait I gave everybody, and otherwise it's all determined by your growth type. Zurfall didn't pick a trait, but because I couldn't give him the growth type he wanted, I couldn't, but it would have been screwing him over. I gave him Femme Fatale, because it will let you do that. You can't have growth type be Tragic Beauty, but you can give yourself the Femme Fatale trait, even if you're a guy. As for what city he ended up in, Zurfall kind of annoyed me a little bit. A lot of people didn't pick a city. A lot of people just said wherever you want is fine. Zurfall put nobody cares for his city. I didn't like that. So this is the city he got. He got this city. He is in Izo. or whatever. I don't know if it was called that. I picked a different era. But he is in Hokkaido. Hokkaido has like 3 locations, like smaller locations that are like kind of attached to this place. It's not that I'm trying to prevent Zerfall from appearing in the LP. It's just he said nobody cares. I'm like, all right, if nobody cares, we'll put you in the most remote place in Japan. It's fucking, as my understanding, I didn't actually visit Hokkaido, or Hokkaido as it's known in one Godzilla film. I didn't visit Hokkaido when I was in Japan, but it is the most remote part of Japan. It's kind of the backwater of Japan even to this day, and it gets freaking cold up there during the winter, because Hokkaido is like on the same kind of latitude as I think it's latitude and longitude as like Siberia. So yeah, that's where you go. And without a head of hair, you're gonna need some woolly hats. That's okay. Actually, now that I think about it, Zerfall's Canadian, so he'll probably be very comfortable up there. Anywhere else, and he'd be like, "Hey, it's too warm down here, eh?" Because Canadians say, "Hey." It's a thing. I hope I hope Zerfall and I are friends enough that I can be that big of a dick. Anyway, here's Con Ringo, who has like the best portrait of all. I'm really surprised that only one person asked for this portrait. So a couple of people are stuck on their second portrait choice, and one person's actually got stuck on their third. But by and large, everyone got the portrait that they asked for first, even if it wasn't the one they meant to ask for, because they misidentified the row. So he's fairly high maintenance officer with a required loyalty of 12, but he makes up for it with his cheerfulness. He's a Ronin and Ozu, and he gave himself pretty balanced stats. Then you have Miri Katoji. Miri Katoji, I don't remember your YouTube username. I think this is the portrait you meant. He's the only guy who actually put a description of the portraits. Like he would say, page 3, row 5, column 7, arrow guy, or whatever. None of your descriptions match. Like, you did not... I'm just telling you. Don't get upset. You clearly did not get how the rows, columns, and stuff worked, because none of your descriptions bore any resemblance to the portraits you actually picked. So when you said arrow guy, I grabbed this because it was like an entire... It was the right column, which is the one thing I felt pretty sure you understood. The rows and pages, I think, were where things got. But it was the right column and it had arrows. So I hope this was the picture you wanted. If not, maybe forget about trying to figure out a page. Just count the rows from that video. And like, if you tell me it's row 37, column 6, I'll get it. But he's got a required loyalty of 5, so he's like, once he joins up with you, he's going to see it through. And he actually, I don't really remember if he intentionally picked the city he ended up in. But yeah, he's kind of a warrior type. I kind of wish a couple more characters like this ended up in my force, because one or two fairly high-end warrior characters are going to end up working for the people around me. Here's Lord Grimaldus, who has, I think, a pretty cool character portrait that he picked for himself. He's going for ghost coins, just like Zerfall. He's in Odani, which I don't remember. Did we establish that Odani is the base of the Azai? Yeah, it is. So a couple of people picked that. I don't know if they want to work for the Azai specifically or not, but it's a pretty popular faction. And yeah, he's a brave horseman. He's AA Arn Anderson. Next up, we got Kyosuke Morikawa, who is probably the #1 most likely guy for me to find and not realize he is a created character, because his name sounds like an actual Japanese guy name. He is progressive. Most characters are progressive, actually. I guess it was Shoot to Maim, was like, I want to be progressive unless that really does mean assigning a religion, in which case I'm like, don't think about it that hard, man. Don't get into your own personal spirituality or atheism or whatever. Just pick a character. It's okay. I think I made his character progressive based on the fact that, yeah, it doesn't make you Christian per se, but it does tend to line up with that in this game anyway. But yeah, Kyuzuki here, as a character in the Rival Schools series, I guess, and he's a brave gunner with fairly war-oriented kind of stats, and he's going to be a good addition to the LP. Mr. P. I like the name Mr. P, actually, and it caused me to look up Dr. P, which is a nickname that Payne from the Gullwings has. But it turns out there's actually like a dubstep producer from the UK named Dr. P. So when I googled Dr. P, it did not bring up a bunch of Final Fantasy X-2 stuff. But that's not Dr. P we're talking about. We're talking about Mr. P. Mr. P is a guy who's going to be a good political officer and a diplomatic monk, and he gave himself faith, and he's a monk. So that was interesting. I kind of wondered if he was going with the monk thing, why he didn't pick a monk portrait, but I like the portrait he picked. Next we have Night Demon! Night Demon may or may not have wanted that portrait. I think Night Demon is one of the people who when I got a portrait that really didn't seem to fit the character otherwise, I was like extra careful doing a second and even third go over to make sure I picked the portrait requested. And this is maybe this is the portrait that they wanted, but I thought they maybe wanted something else and screwed up the rows or columns or something. But Night Demon originally wanted his character to be called Master Reaper. And even though Grimmith did not name his character Master Reaper, I still did not want to give the Master Reaper name to Night Demon. However, Night Demon did give me Night Demon as a name to use if I didn't want to use Master Reaper. And that was wise, because I probably would have given you some name like Wannabe Reaper or Mr. Fake Reaper, or, you know, something. So yeah, you were wise to give yourself an alternate name, Night Demon. And I went with all caps because that's the way that Night Demon's name was given to me. And Night Demon even mentioned that Night Demon isn't the person's YouTube name, so I shouldn't be calling them Night Demon. But anyway, when they texted it to me, when they sent it to me they were using a phone, and therefore said I would underline it, but I can't. So I don't know if they were trying to call my attention to Night Demon by underlining it and making a boldface, but they didn't really want the name Night Demon to be presented that way. But what you've got here is Night Demon in all caps, but not underlined because you can't underline. And Night Demon is more or less a war officer, but good pulse. I mean, all of these characters are pretty good at everything because I gave you guys too many points to play with, really. And he's a Ronin in some location or other, I don't remember. Next up we have Speak Evil. Speak Evil is that's a pretty extreme required loyalty score, but I like it. I mean, somebody thought about it and they really had a vision of their character as somebody who's going to be very loyal, despite the name. It's a bit ominous. They also specifically chose Tier B. None of us really understand what Tier does, so I thought it was kind of nice that somebody went with the opposite extreme. And the lifespan of 69, I don't know if that's them being realistic or them just having a juvenile sense of humor and wanted to put the number 69 in there. I will say they think that's a realistic lifespan because they could have given themselves 69 as at least one of their abilities and they didn't. They probably figure that one would keep changing. But yeah, it's a fairly politically oriented character. And, oh, you were actually a retainer someplace, so let's go see where you were a retainer. Sadawara. Where is that? So, the Ito. I don't really know who the Ito are. But they're on that. The Ito are kind of like down here, I think. So you're actually pretty close to where JG Mystery is actually starting the game over here, and there's at least one female created officer over here. So you know, maybe JG Mystery or maybe Speak Evil will get to have a little bit of create a character romance with this female character but yeah, I don't know. But yeah, they might have just, I think they actually said they wanted to be retained. There's at least one or two people who mentioned a force as a way for me to find the location, and then didn't specify they wanted to work for them. But I assume if you mentioned a force and didn't say Ronin, you mentioned a force because you wanted to work for them. And there we are with that. Next we have, you remember how I said that there were people I was really rooting for? I wasn't willing to break my own rules, but I was hoping they would get in. Yeah, well, here's somebody I was kind of hoping wouldn't get in. No offense to the YouTube user, who I'm sure is a great person, maybe. But this created character is named Some Young Guy. I have two issues with this. First of all, Some Young Guy is... Maybe it's just a lighthearted pun, and I'm looking at it the wrong way, and it's my own fault. But the only context I've ever heard that pun in before is, I'm gonna go to the Chinese restaurant and order the cream of some young guy. It's like, semen. So if you don't, like, if it's not in your mind a semen joke, and you just think it's a cute pun, like, I'm gonna come up with a fake Chinese name for a guy, then okay. But yeah, to me it's a semen joke, A. B, it's not a Japanese pun. It's a pun on, like, fake Chinese. So, again, nothing against the YouTuber, and I made the character, but I was kind of like, man, I gotta put some young guy in this thing, and High Priest Funeral doesn't get in? Anyway. So, he's a pretty decent officer, actually. I mean, they all are, but he's the guy who'd be pretty good. He's got the virtue trait, which I didn't really notice. I might have given it to JG Mystery if I'd been paying more attention, but you actually find treasures. Like, you have a random chance of finding treasures with this guy. I don't know how that works, if it's only when you use the search command, which you only get to do once per city per game. But it's a pretty freaking good skill if it helps you get treasures, because treasures cost a lot of money, and they're very useful for increasing officer loyalty. He's a Ronin in Hirai, and his name is Some Young Guy, and it bugs me. Next up, we have Raiden Weissman. Raiden, I'll take care of it. Raiden Weissman, would you like to save? And various other references to Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. I think was like the last Metal Gear Solid LP that Lethal got all the way through before throwing up his hands in disgust and deciding he needed to LP the series himself to save it from me and Bobo. But he's a progressive dude. He's a his tactic is sharpshoot, which means that he's a master of Canadian submission holds. He can cause Stone Cold Steve Austin to, pass out and get really famous. He actually gave himself a lifespan that wasn't 110. Not that many people did that. And he is a retainer in Inuyama. So let's see where Inuyama is. H then I, JG. Come on. Oh. So this is an odd one. He actually, I guess, specifically asked to work for the other Oda force. The force that Nobunaga is going to have to fight in order to take over. So maybe his thinking was that this would get him in this without starting out on my force. Because I did say I don't want 1 million created officers on my force. So maybe his thinking was that he would be starting out on a force that I was going to have to conquer fairly early. So he'd get into my force fairly early in the overall LP. Or maybe not. Maybe he wants to prevent me from making any progress. Because I'm a little nervous. This is a really good officer. Leadership 80, Valor 91, Intelligence 99. It's very likely that he will be commanding troops in the field against me. And he'd be a really difficult unit to damage. And sometimes high defense units are your biggest pain in the ass because the longer it takes to kill somebody off, the more food your army's eating while they're out in the field fighting. So you can really run through your provisions fighting high valor units. High intelligence means we're not going to be able to use a lot of tactics on them. And unless I've got some comparably equipped created officers, Raiden Weissman has just made the beginning of the game a little bit more difficult for me. But we'll see. Assuming that he's actually willing to join once his force is defeated, and that I'm able to defeat his force. He's somebody I'm expecting to see working for my force fairly early on. And now we have Totoko Otachi. She might be the one who's going to be floating around on the same island with JG Mystery and Speak Evil. I don't remember. But, yeah, another female character. Again, I like seeing female characters in the game. I just think it's not terribly historically accurate for them to be officers, but it just makes it kind of more of a variety. It's fun. And she's... most of the female creative characters did go for, like, an intelligence political build as opposed to high leader. And the idea of leadership is something... a woman can possess leadership, but in this game, leadership basically means ability as a commanding general to inflict damage on troops. It's kind of tied in with war. This game doesn't have duels between officers. And despite all the talk and this, we learn about the samurai warrior culture, but duels between samurai were not a common event. As part of the wars of the Sengoku period, they were mounted archers. They would shoot back and forth arrows at each other. It wasn't like Zhang Fei rides out and challenges Lu Bu to one-on-one battle. They didn't really do it like that. But anyway, I'm off on a thing now. So she picked lucky as her skill, which is kind of neat. Really, lucky and unlucky. Lucky means you're more likely to get captured, or less likely to be captured if you're defeated, and unlucky means you're more likely to be captured. But this is a character who's not terribly likely to be leading troops because of her low leadership score anyway. So, but yeah, Totoko Otachi, and I will probably recognize her as a created officer despite the Japanese name, because most of the Japanese female characters in the game don't have last names. Most of them just have a single name, with one or two exceptions. And now we have Lethal Feline's character, Torayama Risaru. And this is a portrait that at least one other person wanted, but I created the characters in the order in which the submissions were made. So even though Lethal was like, premium guy who gets in automatically because he's worked, he was with me on like a charity stream and stuff, but had somebody else who just randomly picked this face before Lethal picked it, they would have trumped Lethal. There's no favoritism in the portraits. But Lethal got this picture before somebody else could get it. And I don't think he picked a city. I think I just picked one for him randomly. And he went for pretty much a warrior. He's a tiger. He gave himself eccentric, which is actually, despite the goofy name, is a war-based skill. And yeah, this guy, Koyama, what force is that? I'm curious because Lethal's pretty targeted build towards wrecking shit on the battlefield. And I've lost the name of the base that I'm looking for. Koyama. Oh, fuck, yeah. I did notice this at the time. You gotta remember, it took me hours to make all this creative characters, so I don't remember in detail everything, but I did notice he's going to be working for the Imagawa, who are a very powerful faction. Nobunaga, gets the early fame and prestige he gets, which he parlays into even further dominance, is when his humble force is able to defeat the powerful Imagawa clan in battle. And Lethal, I don't think he picked a city. I just picked one for him, and I ended up giving him over, essentially, to the Imagawa. It's not guaranteed he'll work for them, but if the AI hires the Ronins that enter its territory, which it should, he's probably going to go to work for the Imagawa, and he's a fucking wrecking machine. So, yeah, kind of not that sure about that one. Up next, we got Grimmeth Reaper, who did not pick one of the portraits that I thought looked like a previous Grimmeth Reaper portrait, but he was quite pleased with this portrait. He has required loyalty of 15, which basically means he's a pain in the ass. I'm not even kidding. When your required loyalty is 15, it means that, the daimyo has to work really hard to keep you from bitching. And dropping below your required loyalty means it's much more likely for another force will be able to hire you away, but it also, per text descriptions in the game, I think people perform they get bonuses to how well they perform if their loyalty is above their required loyalty, because the text descriptions say things like should perform above expected level, and that's kind of the thing. So Grimmeth's kind of a dick. I mean, Grimmeth Reaper, the in-game character. I certainly would never say anything negative about the actual guy. So he gave himself the 110 lifespan. Pretty much everybody did. He's got the cunning fox tactic, which is a popular one. So he asked me to humor him, and I went ahead and humored him. Grimmeth specifically laid out all these skills. These are essentially the skills. Growth type Hanbei. Hanbei is a strategist who worked for Hideyoshi. He's also the comic relief goofy kid from the tutorial. But this is essentially Hanbei's growth type, so it's not that he gave himself a powerful character growth type and then added stuff on top. He pretty much he's starting with most of the skills that he should have been accumulating throughout the game, and I let him do it. The only thing that bothers me is that he asked to be a retainer for the Hojo. Specifically, he asked to be a Hojo retainer. The Hojo are already pretty powerful. He pointed out that in his own playthroughs, because somebody gifted him this game on Steam. As far as I know, he's not going to LP it. If he does, there goes my viewership. But yeah. But Grimmeth, in his playing of the game, the Hojo ended up becoming the most powerful force, and that's the thing. With the historical events, I don't really know how that works, because you can follow the strand of history with your own party and have your own group. There's unique events with scripted dialogue and stuff. Not really voice acted, it's just text. But I don't know if the other forces are following a preset pattern then. Because if they're not, the Hojo is a force that was very powerful. They were in kind of the eastern part of Honshu. They were the last, because Hideyoshi actually unified Japan before Tokugawa did, but Tokugawa had the lasting unification, so he kind of gets the credit for being the one who really unified. But Hideyoshi unified Japan, and essentially the last powerful force to fight him was the Hojo, because he conquered all the rest of Japan, and even the Date came to surrender, but the Hojo were the last ones. That he had the big siege of Otawara Castle, which is a big part of the Samurai Warrior games. But Grimmeth says that in his adventures, that the Hojo actually became a more powerful force than his own, and it makes sense. They were one of the most powerful clans of kind of the previous generation, and if the AI has their kind of officers and troops and stuff at its disposal and plays aggressively, it is a force that could become more of a threat to Nobunaga than they actually were. In real history, there was a couple of clans between Nobunaga's territory and Hojo territory, and Nobunaga spent a lot of his time trying to conquer to the west. So he didn't come up against the Hojo that much. But Grimmeth's whole thing was it'll be really this will be really cool. Trust me, give me this character who's already got all these skills. And he didn't even make himself a war character. He made himself a pole character to help build up the Hojo's strength. So in the long term, the longer you got this asshole with his 100 intelligence and 100 pole and all these skills building up Hojo territory, the harder a nut they'll be to crack whenever I do deal with them. And his whole thing was just it might be really interesting. See if I can unbalance the game in favor of the Hojo. And I'm like, oh god, Grimmeth, I'm trying to follow the history. But at the same time, it probably can't follow the history all the way through no matter what. And it could be really interesting. Not to mention, if we ever do get our hands on Grimmeth Reaper after conquering the Hojo, well, by the time we conquer the Hojo, the game will be mostly over anyway, but he would be a great addition to our force for sure. I don't need a bunch of officers who spread their points evenly. I need specialists in building up my empire and specialists in wrecking shit on the field. Between the two of them, Lethal's character and Grimmeth's character would be a hell of a pair. Anyway, moving on, because this is going really slow. Nobunaga Io. This is one where I was kind of in the middle. There's a couple of things they didn't fill in and they left me to pick, and I was like, well, okay. Because I was on the borderline about whether to throw out submissions like that. But they filled in most of their stuff. And they gave themselves 50 and everything, which I wasn't that crazy about. You know what? No. There was at least one character, maybe this was the one, whose submission didn't list what their ability points should be, and asked me to pick their trait. Growth type moderate. I mean, in a way, this is the laziest submission of all. Growth type is the default. All abilities are the default. They asked me to pick their trait. But, you know, I pretty much figured out. I'd already drawn the names, and I guess I didn't feel like messing with it. But Nobunaga, be warned, buddy. This was a close one. I almost didn't go with you, but I did like the portrait, though. Liked the portrait a lot. And, you know, it's nice to have not every single character. Like, if the people who gave themselves lower ability scores, you are more of a realistic officer than, like, all these officers who are just good at everything. Next we have Alza Ryan, who actually picked one of the alternate Nobunaga portraits. So that was interesting. Not a lot of people actually picked off of the EX portraits. Most people picked from the regular male and regular female portraits. Yeah, but this is essentially a warrior type. They picked Yukimura as growth type, which was an interesting call. And I don't remember what location you ended up at, but you are a retainer, so let's look it up. For the retainers, I'm pretty much looking it up. People who actually went out of their way to pick a force. Tsujikasaki. Probably should have started from the bottom up, actually. Might have been faster. But they specifically asked to be on... Oh, you know what? I don't think they picked the city. They just said they wanted to work for the Takeda. I remember that now, because I remember thinking it was kind of weird that why are you picking Nobunaga's portrait but going to work for the Takeda? But, you know, whatever. It's all good. Next up, we got Sarako. Maybe this is the one where I picked this ninja portrait, but I wasn't actually sure that that was what they wanted. There was a little confusion about how they picked. But they're a Ronin and novice ninja. Oh, I remember. I think I remember this character. Yeah, the person who created this character had this kind of kooky. They actually went into describing the personality of their character, which was like, well, it's interesting, but it's not like I can do much with that in the LP. But unless you end up on my force, and when I can kind of joke about it. But they had this whole thing. Am I thinking about somebody else? No, I think it was Sarako, who wanted to. They were thinking about having like a female portrait and a male body. I might be mixing up two characters. Somebody picked Novice Ninja, and the idea was they wanted to have a male character and give them a female portrait and one of the female growth types. And it was just kind of, I guess there was like a gender confusion. I don't know if it's gender confusion humor or if it's gender confusion we're meant to be taking very seriously, but their alternate was Novice Ninja, and the joke was that this was a man who disguises himself as a woman to assassinate people, but they're not that competent, so they end up they're not actually a master ninja, they're just a novice, because even though they have this brilliant tactic of disguising themselves as a woman, they still screw up half the time. But now I'm thinking maybe that's not this. Maybe that might have been Delicious Tacos who ended up in the getting selected. But yeah, so I might have just confused two different people. Now we have Xiaolong Yang, and you know, I was like, yeah, you pick what name you want, but we're in Japan, not China. I was figuring I'd mostly get Western names or people trying to come up with Japanese names. But regardless of that, you know, and it sounds like I'm being all critical, complaining, but this is a pretty good build. Somebody would be really great in politics and intelligence, and if they were called to go out and fight, they would be able to deal some damage, but you probably don't want them in a long engagement. And nothing else is really jumping out to me, so let's keep going. Yamada Okada. Kind of an interesting portrait. Winter Die Tactic. He actually wants to be a retainer, so let's look and see where he chose to be a retainer. In Funai. So he wanted to work for the Otomo clan, but the most interesting thing to me is that he lives in Bungo. So, he is a proud resident of Bungo. And he made himself primarily a political officer. But again, it's actually pretty much the same build as the last guy, wasn't it? It's exactly the same build as the last guy. I might need to go back and make sure. Well, I'll tell you what, you guys might want to let me know if I screwed up, and like was maybe my ice skipped down to the previous entry, but it's just a weird coincidence they have otherwise the exact same build. Required loyalty is 1, which basically means that this guy incredibly loyal. Like once he goes to work for a force, you will not be able to hire this guy away from the force. You would have to capture him and force him to work for you that way. And he did pick a force that he wanted to work for, so that guy, it's unlikely that he'll ever work for us. And now we have somebody who decided they wanted to pick some kind of like sexed up Masamune. This is one of the EX portraits. I assume this was Masamune in some game. I don't know. But it's like ultra sexy Masamune. And but he's actually Zelnarak Tetsu no Kabe. And he's an imposing guardian. He picked a lifespan other than 110. He's a Ronin and Master Fortifier. And he's got a sexy, sexy look. Next we have Garth Morrigan. I'm surprised that only one person tried for this portrait. I thought people would be fighting over it. But he is, in fact, a Western clown. And wearing a fedora. And he's in Ronin and Nagoya. And he's got kind of run-of-the-mill type of stats. Like, just 80 across the board. But I'm just glad somebody took that portrait. Kolio Wing, who picked one of the EX, this is a picture of Shingen Takeda from another game. I think Bobo actually asked for this portrait, and I felt bad, but Kolio Wing submitted first, and I'm trying to be fair, so Bobo did not get this picture. He also has a lifespan less than 110. He gave himself a mostly political build despite having the appearance of one of the great warlords of Japanese history. And he's a Ronin. So, the person who made that selection might not even have known that that was actually a picture of Shingen Takeda. They just thought it was a cool looking picture. Next we have Master Miller. Master Miller, who of course, the submission for this had joking references to the Master Miller. Master Miller is, of course, a character from the Metal Gear series. And there was joking references to it, like, he's got awesome skills because of his time in the Japanese Self-Defense Force and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that... I can't remember the YouTube user who came up with Master Miller, but I'm figuring maybe it's somebody who's been watching Bobo when I play through the games, or maybe not. But he's a Ronin at Kanoji, and he gave himself kind of a mixed bag of stats. But I love the hat, love the character name. There's not that many blonde characters blonde portraits you could have gone with, unfortunately. And we have Miliardo Peacecraft. I believe Miliardo Peacecraft is a character from Gundam Wing, and nothing against the YouTuber. I couldn't finish watching that show. I just did not like that show. So when I see Miliardo Peacecraft, I don't know which character he was, but I'm going to assume he was the whiny blonde kid from like the Sand Kingdom or whatever. Probably not correct. He's kind of got a warrior build, which is cool. He's a Ronin, and he's Miliardo Peacecraft. So I expect he was supposed to be like a badass who could, with his Gundam, single-handedly defeat a million loser Gundams, like most of the characters in that series who had a name. Somebody decided to make a call of Lu Bu. This is the second portrait, because the first portrait they wanted had already been taken by Lethal. But I don't think they gave me a location. I think I just picked one at random. The interesting thing is that I think, based on these stats, I think they might have gone with the actual stats Lu Bu had in a previous game or something. Because Lu Bu's big thing is always war, which isn't in this game. And otherwise, I'm not sure why you would give... Like, leader is basically your ability to inflict damage in combat. It's not by personally going out there and wrecking shit. It's by leading troops. So I don't know why Lu Bu would have such a low leader score. But the low intelligence and low pulse scores are very much in line with how Lu Bu's always decked out in RTK games. Ogre is a growth type, and skill is a pretty good choice for Lu Bu. But yeah, somebody decided that Lu Bu, if Lu Bu wants to do battle with cowboys, well, step one is to travel to the future, his own future. Now, from Japan, he's probably hoping to gain passage on a ship to the American West. So that has to be the long-term goal of Lu Bu. But for now, Lu Bu, well, he's only going to live to 60. So yeah, Lu Bu has 60 years, starting in 1519, to make his way to America. See if he can get out of Japan in one piece. The Grand Line. Now we have Sakai Maseki. I might have misspelled your name. Is that the name that you wanted? Well, I don't have it all in front of me. So yeah, let me know if there's any mistakes. But let me know sooner rather than later. I need to hurry up and publish this video, because otherwise I'm just not going to be able to play tomorrow. I have to. The thing is, I'll either have videos that I recorded like very shortly after this one up, or it'll be like a week before I'll have a chance to record. So there might be a little dry spell before the LP starts. But he's a Ronin in Odawara. He's very much a war dude, and he's lucky, which means it'll be hard to capture him in battle. Which is a skill that I love to have for officers if they're already working for me, but if they're not working for me yet, I'm not as crazy about it. Now we have Akira Hato, I don't know. The person put a straight line over the A, like an accent mark. I couldn't do that. I tried. As a matter of fact, I even, for the A, tried to do... See, it's not one of the choices, but I was going to go with an A with what some folks call a tilde. Others, I'm Irish, so I know that as a Shinu Father. But it doesn't work. It comes out as this goofy symbol. The PlayStation 3 keyboard recognizes it, but RTK does. Or sorry, Nobunaga's Ambition doesn't. So we had to drop the accent mark. My apologies. She specifically asked to be a Ronin at Nagashino, and considering that she's got red wicker armor on, I'm pretty sure the person, male or female, who created this character intended for her to be working for the Hojo. Not the Hojo, excuse me, the Takeda. That's most likely going to happen. She's got like the Takeda war outfit going. I don't know if that symbol up at the top of the helmet is Takeda. I don't think it is, but she went with female daimyo growth and made herself more political character. So she, in all likelihood, will be hired by the Takeda and is going to help build up their forces so that the pretty badass generals the Takeda already have will be able to lead them in battle. Next, we got Kadia Kaldaka, I guess she's some kind of Klingon warrior. Kadia Kaldaka will be your Chadich come time for the Jar Shook. Then together you will cross the river of blood to Stovok, or whatever. Anyway, she's a Ronin, and I don't remember whether she picked that city or if it was just randomly decided on. She's got pretty balanced stats, but she's actually more of a moderate, which I think maybe she just didn't. Yeah, I'm looking at it. I think this character forgot to give me a growth type and trait, and if you just flat out didn't give me a trait, I didn't pick one for you. I just somebody asked me to pick a trait for them. I did. Otherwise, if you didn't pick a trait, you didn't get a trait. You just get whatever came with your growth type. And maybe it was this person, didn't pick a growth type, and I just gave them moderate. But they decked out everything else. And I like seeing female characters in the game, so I was happy to see this character. Next, we got Charlton Jaina, who is a Ronin and Harumi, and she's got a low required loyalty, so she'll be pretty loyal to her force. And she went with Maiden Warrior, but made herself more a political character, and there you go. Don't have a whole lot else I can think of to say. Now it's time for Vulture Bobo. Vulture Bobo, I had to go with Vulture Bobo's second portrait. I think it's not a bad portrait. It's less of a crazy beard than previous Vulture Bobos have had. The portrait he wanted had a really crazy beard, but it was taken by somebody else. And he wanted to be a relative of... Well, actually, Vulture Bobo didn't specify having a relative. And I was going to make JG Mystery, Bobo's relative, but I went with Vulture Bean. I'll explain why a little bit more when we get to Vulture Bean. But gave himself kind of a warrior build. Made himself. It's an now for the Vulture Bobo character, not for my brother Bobo the Vulture, but for the Vulture Bobo character, that intelligence seems a little high. That being said, if he wants to be like bearded warrior man, Pole is the dump stat because intelligence does have an impact in combat. Pole does not, so it makes sense that the dump stat would be Pole. And clearly he could have had Pole be even lower and put his intelligence up, but in line with the Vulture Bobo character we know and love, bearded warrior man, it was appropriate that he had his intelligence not be as high as those other stats. But capture he gave himself as a stat, and if I get Vulture Bobo in my army, that'll be one of my favorite things for my generals to have. So I'll probably be using Vulture Bobo as one of my generals, if I can ever get him in my force. Now, for location, he asked to go to. Let's see if I can quick find, because he actually gave me the name of the city, but it's the modern Japanese city. It's not reflected in this game. But Takayama, which is the home of Saru Bobo. So when we were in Japan, because we had a vacation trip to Japan together a couple years ago, some of you guys know, there's like well, it's a thing. I don't know how to describe it. It's this kind of mascot called Saru Bobo, who is supposed to be like, it's supposed to be a monkey doll, sort of, but it doesn't really look like a monkey to me at all. You can look up Saru Bobo online, but it's like a good luck charm, and you can in Takayama you can buy all sorts of Vulture Bobo trinkets. They sell them to tourists, and there's some kind of local legend connected to it. But yeah, we just enjoyed the idea that Vulture Bobo is like connected to Saru Bobo. So he wanted to come from the city. Couldn't really figure that out, Bobo. So what I did is I looked at a map of Japan and Takayama, and Takayama is kind of like, it's kind of in here somewhere. It's in this general area, so I just gave you one of these forces. So you're working for Nagamoto Jinbo. Well, actually you're not, you're Ronin, but you'll most likely be hired by Nagamoto Jinbo at Toyama Castle. That is not a force that I'm expecting to see last that long. But hell, having a general with Bobo stats could make a very big difference in that, to be honest. And he gave himself a very low required loyalty, so he will be loyal to whatever force hires him for a long time, despite the tactic Bond Breaker. Now the name Bond Breaker is deceiving. It's something you do that has an effect on your enemies, but the name Bond Breaker suggests that he's actually, like, quick to betray, but his required loyalty makes that not true. And he's a progressive, so that's nice. And Vulture Bean. And, honestly, that portrait doesn't look entirely unlike Bean. But, yeah, reasonable. I mean, out of the choices that Bean had at his disposal, that's not a bad representation of Bean. But, Vulture Bean is related to Vulture Bobo, and that was what she requested. Now, she came up with the name Vulture Bean. I don't know. If you guys want me to marry you guys, if you guys both join my force, you can do that in this game. Let me know. I don't know what you guys are doing with the same last name. But, yeah, you can't actually create, like, you can marry the in-game, but I think you can anyway, but I can't actually do that with the created characters from this menu. It's weird. But she's a cunning fox. Foxy lady, and she is progressive and this, that, and the other, and she is a female daimyo. She's mostly political. She wanted the flood controller skill, which I think makes you better at producing crops. But the big thing was that, like, Bobo wrote the descriptions for both. Like, Bean gave him some instructions and then left him to type it up. And for location, he just put in quotes, a castle. That was apparently, Bean wants to be in a castle. She couldn't be bothered to figure out which one. So I initially went to the list and was like randomly going to pick a castle, and then I realized, hey, Vulture Bobo, I'd already picked his location, and it actually is. Toyama actually is a location with a castle in this game. So I just went ahead and made Vulture B and B at the same place, and since they're relatives, and that's the other reason I didn't make, for JG Mystery, Vulture Bobo is listed as relative. But with Vulture Bobo, I made Vulture Bean relative, just in case if the game doesn't recognize that Vulture Bobo should treat JG Mystery as a relative, because JG Mystery shows Vulture Bobo as a relative. If Vulture Bobo will only treat one character as a relative, I figured it would make sense to pair up the two Vultures here, and because they're in the same city. It's not really that likely that Vulture Bobo and JG Mystery will even come into contact unless I eventually recruit them both. So that force there, the force in Toyama, which is kind of this backwater nobody cares force, is now probably, if the AI is smart and they have enough money, they're going to hire a really good war officer and a really good domestic officer. And that's actually, out of all the forces that we've really changed, that's the force that's really changed a lot. And now everything I said before about that novice ninja character, yeah, it was Delicious Tacos, my bad. Apologies. So Delicious Tacos had kind of a whimsical description of the character. They wanted they didn't pick a specific portrait. They wanted the, quote, first available female portrait, or maybe just the goofiest female portrait, whatever you think. Actually, pick the goofiest portrait. Well, this was the first available female portrait, and I think she looks pretty freaking goofy, so I just stuck with this. But there's this whole thing, they'd written up this description. They wanted to be male but have a female appearance and have a female growth type, but if that wouldn't work, they would go with Novice Ninja, and the joke is that it's a man disguising himself as a woman in order to assassinate people, but they can't do it because they're incompetent. And they're really greedy, which is their required loyalty is 12 because they're all greedy and they need money to buy delicious tacos because tacos don't exist yet, so that must be really expensive. And there's a lot of whimsical humor in there. The biggest issue, though, I gotta say, is they did say location, Oda. That's where the Oda start, right? And then they were like, oh, but if you're sick of everybody trying to join your force, I guess it's okay and I'll go somewhere else. But I'd really like to be, with the Oda. Well, here's the problem. Oda is a location, but it's not actually where I'm starting out. But since you mentioned that maybe I wouldn't want you in my force right away, I did go ahead and, even though I've realized that you didn't really think through Oda Castle as your location, because this is other daimyo, Masaharu Oda. I don't even know what the story is with this Oda clan having a different logo from this Oda clan. I think it's probably something where the names are different in Japanese and it doesn't translate over well with the Roman alphabet. They're probably not even related. But no, I put you in Oda Castle. So I guess you wanted to be on my force. I couldn't really tell. I would have, been happy to welcome any of the created officers, unless you specifically set your abilities low. We're going to be better than most of my officers, but you ended up over there, so it is what it is. Now we got Atata Oravi. I don't know how to pronounce this name, but they're a Ronin warrior dude who's really smart and good with guns, and don't really have anything to say, and the video's running long, so let's just keep going. We got Ryu Doragon, who I think you were the guy who was stuck with your third choice portrait, but your third choice portrait's still pretty badass. And he's a mostly war-oriented kind of dude, and he gave himself one-eyed dragon skill, which makes sense when you got that look going on. Oh, and that's it. Okay, actually, we're closer to the end than I thought, because I had all these others to go, but they're actually the ones that already exist in the game. So yeah, I was really starting to think, like, man, how much more have we got to do? But no, we're actually done. So I'm going to activate all these characters who... Oh. Now we've got 67 active officers. And I'm going to save. and it won't let me. I want to actually go in and look at them and read the descriptions. I was actually going to do that as part of the video, but the game doesn't want to let me do that. So these are alphabetized, so I won't actually be able to find them that way. So yeah, all the created characters have been thrown in there for funsies. It's possible that I'll do, you know, depending on how long this takes, this LP, maybe I'll actually do another playthrough, and maybe I'll go through and make some of the other characters who were submitted but weren't selected this time and use them. All sorts of things are possible, but this has been a 90-minute video introducing all 50 created characters. Wow. So I'm just gonna like get something to drink, try to rest my voice. I'm gonna try to give you guys time. I guess I won't record any of this tomorrow. I'll try to give you guys time to write back and say, no, JG, that's not the portrait I wanted, or no, you screwed up. That's, you know, give you guys time to make little corrections. If I got the wrong portrait, please go back and review the section of that first video. I know it's monotonous, but if you go back and review that section of the video to explain how I meant for you to tell me the portrait, I'm gonna go out there and say if I got the portrait wrong, it probably is because you didn't explain it the way I told you to. Maybe you did it perfectly and I had like a brain fart. I mean, I did create 51 characters, so maybe I had a brain fart on one and you explained how what portrait you wanted perfectly in line with my instructions, and I still goofed it up. But it probably is because you didn't do something the way that I was expecting it. So yeah, but if you got in and you want to change something, let me know as fast as possible. Otherwise, there's a real good chance you're just going to have to lump it and go with what you got. Hey, at least you got into the LP. For those who didn't get in, better luck next time. Sorry, I hope you watch and enjoy. And for everybody, man, there won't be any more 90-minute videos. This is it. Once we get into gameplay, it's going to be roughly 30 minutes a pop, and that's just how we're going to do it. Sometimes they might go a little long. I can't imagine anything going over double length, and if things start going double length, I usually split post, you know, after the fact. So this is the last, like, really, really, really long video of the LP. That being said, it's a KOI strategy game. It's probably going to take quite a few of those 30-minute videos to take this thing home. But I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you are too. I'm the Mysterious JG, aka JG Mystery. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time as we actually finally begin with the Birth of Nobunaga scenario. The idea, again, to review. I'm trying to sign off here, but I know that events from Viper of Mino, like playing off-screen on easy difficulty to learn the controls, I could start a game in Viper of Mino, and historical scenario stuff will pop, and if I start in Birth of Nobunaga, and I play for a certain length of time, and I do things right, the Viper of Mino stuff will pop. In other words, it should theoretically be possible to play through a couple of these. At least the ones that have events for the Oda. So I'm really curious what happens when we get to the, like, hey, can I keep it going? Or will I hit a point where I've broken it and they're not going to populate new historical events anymore? Will I even know that happened without spending 10 years, like, just treading water and building my cities and not wanting to attack anyone? And then what happens when I get to the scenario where Nobunaga is supposed to die? Am I going to get game over, or is it going to let me keep on playing? If so, I guess I would play as a Toyotomi. In theory, I should be able to play through this entire game. And at the very end, conquer the land as the Tokugawa. But even here, you see, this is the last scenario. The Tokugawa are, well, you may or may not know their logo from previous games, so they're kind of in the southeastern corner of this map there. But they've got several territories scattered. They've got an alliance. They've got territories that are allied with them. But they're not really, like, it's not like a full-on conquest. Like, this is Nobunaga's high water mark, and he still holds less than half the fiefs in Japan. So do I get a true game over if I follow history and kind of diplomatically conquer things? I don't know. I'm kind of looking forward to finding out, though. But if it turns out going the historical route really kind of breaks things or makes it difficult, then I'll either drop it or I'll finish that and maybe do another LP where I'm just like, all right, fuck it. I'm gonna grab a bunch of created officers. I'll do like the Samurai Warriors Empires thing with Sakon Shima. I'm gonna grab a bunch of created officers. I'm gonna start in Kyushu and I'm just gonna bulldoze over all Japan. Or maybe I'll just dump a bunch of created officers into the oh, now I'm blanking on the name of the clan. The Shibata. Maybe I'll just give the Shibata a bunch of created officers and just have the Shibata like stomp their way. Or maybe I'll go to this backwater city that I stuck Zerfall in, drop a bunch of created officers there, and try to take over Japan from there. But all of these are things I'm thinking about real long term, because next time, folks, Birth of Nobunaga as the Oda. I'm Mysterious JG. Thanks for watching. See you next time.